Call this task force back to order. Appreciate everybody coming back after lunch and instead of going to take a nap. I do want to make an announcement moving forward today. Once the task force has heard all the presentations that are on the agenda, we will open the floor for comments from the public. At that time, we'll ask that anyone wishing to speak come forward and form kind of an orderly line near the podium. Once you reach the podium, please state your name, the name of your organization you represent, if any. You'll have 5 minutes to speak, and we'll allow time for questions from the task force members should they have any. So just be prepared for that. Next on our agenda list, we have Holly Alexander with Eastman. Look forward to hearing from you. Just turn the microphone on, and then let's see, the presentation's already up. Mr. Holland must have gotten that ready for you. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much to Chairman Todd, Chairman Reeves for the opportunity to speak to you all and to all of you serving on this task force. This is an issue that is very important to Eastman, and we're very excited to share some of what we're doing. Have been very pleased to have heard our organization referenced multiple times throughout the event, whether from TDEC or from other folks who are on your task force. For those of you who may not be familiar with Eastman, we're a 100-plus-year-old company headquartered in Kingsport, Tennessee. And the area where I'm going to spend some focus on today is going to be around our plastics business. But it is important to note that plastics is simply one of the businesses that we have. Of our different portfolios, we have about it's kind of one of four in that space. Now in Kingsport too, we're a pretty significant employer there, and we employ about 14,000 people globally, but of that 6,500 Eastman employees in Kingsport, with about another 3,000 contractors that are actually working there on site in Kingsport, Tennessee. Eastman is actually working in a variety of different areas to enable plastic circularity. And we're doing this through three different pathways. One is obviously reuse and refill. The more we can move away from single-use applications, the better we do at managing waste. Additionally, we also have materials on the market today that work really well in composting situations. So whether it's food service applications or other things that might carry organic waste that make them good candidates for compost applications, that's a place we're working. Where we're going to spend our time today is focusing on recycling. And we'll talk mostly about the materials that we're selling in this space, but particularly about an investment that we've made in Kingsport around what we call molecular recycling. Now, when you think about plastic recycling, it tends to be, it's a really brilliant process. If you think you gather essentially a bunch of materials that are very like each other. So think water bottles, carbonated soft drink bottles. You get all of these together. Essentially what you're going to do is you're going to chop them up, wash them, and remelt them and turn them into a new application. It's a fairly simple process that doesn't require a lot of energy intensity. It's low greenhouse gas emissions, but one of the big requirements there is you have to generate a very clean stream of material. As you can well imagine, if you take a bunch of plastics and you have a dark blue bottle mixed in with clear ones, it's obviously going to contaminate within that process. So mechanical recycling is great, but it definitely has some limitations. Now, what we're doing at Eastman is we're working on what's called molecular recycling. That's the term that we've used because we are breaking our polymers back down to the molecular level. Now, you will also hear different organizations refer to this as chemical recycling. You'll also hear advanced recycling. And those are different terms out there that are generally referring to a collection of technologies, not a single technology. We will focus today and talk very specifically about what Eastman is doing, but do bear in mind that when you hear other organizations or folks talking about it, it might be a different technology. Okay. Now, one of the benefits with molecular recycling is this gives us a chance, particularly on PET, which is where Eastman focuses with this technology. It gives us a chance to reset the polymer. It's a way for us to take a plastic that would generally show degradation over time and bring it back to life, back to virgin-like quality. So removing the contaminants, removing some of the different degradations that you would start to see in performance and aesthetics over time. So this allows us to get to an infinite level of recyclability with polyester. So one of the things that I've learned, and very clearly, I do work for a chemical company. I am not a chemist, and these are the only chemical molecules that you're going to see in this presentation. But one thing I wanted to share with you is that quite often I'll tell people that we're breaking these plastics back down to their building blocks, but not everybody knows how plastics are made. So what I wanted to start with here is just kind of show you, like, plastics are made from carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens that are generally derived from fossil fuels. So whether it's natural gas or coal or oil, and then, of course, oxygen from the air, we use those to put them together to create these different formulations of plastics that we all use and touch and handle every day. With chemical recycling, our goal is simply to replace the source of those carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens, and now to get them from products that have met the end of their useful life, rather than continuing to dig additional fossil fuels out of the earth or mine them. We are focused on leveraging the ones that are already in circulation but have done their first job. So methanolysis is the technology where Eastman is investing. And basically, methanol is used as a catalyst in this process. Okay, so that's where the methanolysis comes from. What we do at Eastman is we take a stream of recovered polyester or PET products. Now, these can be from textiles, because about 60% of our textiles are made from polyester today. Also, much of the residential carpet that's on the market is made out of polyester today. So we're focusing on polyesters that are harder to recycle. Now, from the packaging space, instead of focusing and recycling clear bottles, we're working on the types of materials that do not have good homes today. So if you think about the clamshells or the thermoforms that your blueberries come in, or different berries, your bakery containers. Those types of containers, they're made out of PET, but they're just enough different that the PET reclaimers who do the mechanical recycling don't want very much of that, if any, in their process. The other area that we're focusing is, of course, then going to be like colored and opaque PET. We talked about colorants before. So these are materials that we can get. And so we'll talk a bit more about where we're getting these feedstocks, but trying to build a capability of this technology to be able to be additive in the system, we think is core to one of our principles, as opposed to continuing to fight for some of the other plastics that may be collected and sorted today. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how methanolysis works. So we get this basically aggregated set of polyester-based material, and it goes into first a mechanical purification process. And we'll watch a short video so you can see how that works. But with the mechanical purification process, anything that's not PET that could be sorted out easily on the front end is the goal there before we break those polymers back down into their building blocks. After that, it goes into depolymerization. In depolymerization, we make two of the monomers that are used to make polyester. So DMT and ethylene glycol. So dimethyl terephthalate and ethylene glycol, or EG. And then those two monomers go right back into manufacture of new polyesters. And from that, we're producing a lot of products that are on the market today and, very likely maybe in your homes now. So we're very excited about this process, and it is commercial and is up and running. We started up in March of 2024. Okay, let's go just a little bit deeper into the types of products that we're using. So in addition to the colored rejects that PET reclaimers don't want to use, we're also processing purge or byproducts from those folks. So we're expanding what is actually getting recycled by handling waste streams that come from PET reclaimers. Additionally, we've added used green strapping. So almost all of the green strapping that you see holding material to pallets driving down the road, many of those are made out of Mountain Dew bottles. or Sprite bottles before they transitioned, or Dr. Enough bottles if you're from Northeast Tennessee. But those are the types of products that go into strapping today. Now, typically that would have been, we'll recycle it once and then it's a direct path to the landfill. But now we have an opportunity to take that material and bring it back into the system and convert it back into virgin-like clear material. Okay. We're also working on textile. Textiles are a little bit further behind. And I believe that one thing that was mentioned in this is that textiles and clothing seem to be one of the fastest growing categories of material in the municipal solid waste stream. And so finding an option for those is going to be important in the longer term. And then we're also working on some carpet fiber. As I mentioned too, a lot of the carpet fiber today is actually made with polyester. I'm going to show you guys a real quick video so you can see a little bit in terms of how this preparation goes. And now we will cross our fingers. It's not there. Did we close it? Oh no, here it is. Thank you. All right.
Welcome to Eastman's Mixed Plastics Processing Plant. At this site, we accept hard-to-recycle polyester materials, which we'll recycle back to their original polymer building blocks called monomers. These monomers can then be used to create new materials for a truly circular solution that keeps waste out of landfills and incinerators. When trucks arrive and leave the plant, they're weighed by our team. This lets us track volume received and shipped. We accept materials in boxes, sacks, and bales. We also take loose material in open-top containers. To start the process, trucks back into one of our loading docks, where our forklift operators watch for visual cues to know trucks are ready for unloading. Next, we'll offload materials to our production lines or one of our on-site storage areas. Inside the mixed plastics processing facility, we have multiple production lines to handle a wide variety of form factors. For the first operation, we start production by loading material onto a conveyor belt. Material passes through a metal detector before being processed. Then we screen this processed material, and acceptable material is sent to storage for later use, while other material receives additional processing or removal. In a second process, the material is modified in size and shape in order to be fed to the methanolysis process effectively. Multiple feedstock forms, shapes, and sizes are processed into a usable form. Mixed plastic waste, such as opaque and colored bottles, are sent to a third line for separation. Large contaminants are removed at a manual picking station. We strive to find end-of-life solutions for all components. That's why the non-PET materials are collected for external sale or internal consumption. The material is then shredded into individual flakes. After that, it's sent to a separation process to remove non-PET components. The PET material is then dried and collected for storage. Once needed, the material is loaded and taken to our methanolysis plant, where it is used for feedstock. At Eastman, we're working every day to create circular solutions. Our mixed plastics processing facility is crucial to creating an endless life cycle for polymers.
Thank you.
My energy bill dropped from $150 to $50 by doing this. My friends
thank
laughed at me
goodness.
when I...
Okay. Sorry, if anybody wants to go back to that, I'd like to learn to reduce my energy bill. Okay, so a couple of things. So again, I thought it might be helpful. It takes a little bit of time to see the video, but I think sometimes seeing it visually is a much more helpful way to understand what we're doing and the types of materials that we're bringing in. Now, it would not be a presentation in the state of Tennessee if I didn't share with you a little bit around the scale of what we're doing. So we're looking at about 250 million pounds of recovered polyester that we will be able to recycle on an annual basis. And we wanted to just give you a little bit of sense of scale of that. So if you look at Neyland Stadium, it helps you to kind of see that we could actually fill the stadium 2.5 times with that volume of material. And so it's a very, very large scale initiative that we've undertaken to be able to do this. But that equates to about 11 billion bottles or 790 million shirts, or 2.7 billion, say like drinking hydration vessels, like a Camelback bottle or something like that. Okay, so this material is on the market right now. What Eastman has done is we are selling it under our Renew name. And so for many of the materials that we already produce in our specialty copolyesters line and going into traditional PET, we're marketing it with Renew just to designate the ones that have the allocated recycled content. So this is going back into crystal clear, whether it's hydration vessels, whether it is a Ninja blender, different cosmetics applications, even some more traditional PET, like things going into, Procter & Gamble products or food products. We also have these materials that are being recycled going back into medical applications. And this is a really transformative space for a recycled plastic to be able to use. And it's because we are breaking this back down into its basic building blocks that we are able to service the medical industry there as well without fear or concerns of contamination that might come along with mechanical recycling. Now, to be very clear, we believe that mechanical recycling is critical and is very important because it is lower energy, it's lower cost than a technology like ours, but we see our technology as being very complementary to that. So this is real. This is what's happening. That's our methanolysis plant before they closed it all in as they finish startup. But we, again, as I said, we started up in March of 2024. This year, we've already recycled over 100 million pounds of recovered polyester. And generally with these applications, we are delivering about a 90% yield in terms of usable monomers coming out of the materials that are going in. So it's a fairly high yield technology that also then is putting really high quality materials back into the market. So the big question is how do we increase or improve recycling in the state of Tennessee? And one of the things that we've looked at, and from an Eastman standpoint, we need to collect more, but we also need to sort a little bit better than maybe what we've done because we have new technologies now. Historically, sorting was very simple. I believe it was actually Mr. Hoffman earlier mentioning polypropylene. 20 years ago, we didn't collect polypropylene going into the MRFs, but that material is now being collected. Now, as we start thinking about PET, can we start to collect PET and sort it for mechanical recycling, and then maybe also sort it for chemical recycling where that makes sense? So those are some of the things we're looking at, but very, very important to keep in mind that it really will take all technologies at the table to create plastic circularity. So for example, really happy to share one of the things that we did locally in Kingsport with Food City is trying to help rebuild recycling after we had in Kingsport essentially a shutdown of the curbside recycling program after National Sword. National Sword was when China stopped allowing material to come into the country, 2018, 2019. And it really undermined the markets, the end markets for these materials, and costs kind of went through the roof in a lot of places and made things very challenging. So as we were starting up this technology, we realized that our employees and the local community in Kingsport didn't really have a good venue to be able to recycle plastics. And that's where our collaboration with Food City came to hand. So it started to create a collection option for folks locally. Now, one other thing that's a pretty significant investment and a collaboration for Eastman is the work that we've done with Rumpke. I think Rumpke was mentioned earlier today also. This is a state-of-the-art MRF in Columbus, Ohio that Rumpke built. When they built this MRF, they planned on creating 2 streams of PET. Typically what happens at a MRF is they create bales of PET and they sell them and they go to reclaimers. What they're doing at Rumpke is they're creating one stream of material that is clear thermoforms and colored bottles and that's coming to Eastman. And then the clear bottles are still going to the mechanical reclaimers. So that way we're taking advantage of the capabilities of both of the technologies, really creating a stronger stream for the mechanical reclaimers and getting material to us that likely would have gone to landfill otherwise. So as Eastman is looking at this, a couple of things that we would love for this task force to keep in mind as you're considering different solutions as we're going forward. One of the first things is that anytime you define recycling, it's very important to make sure that there are allowances for some of these technologies. It's completely appropriate for there to be guardrails around these, around environmental impact and on let's say the total conversion rates and things like that that go with the technologies. But we need additional technologies to do what we need to do. We also would hope that there is an ability to get some recognition for investments that are creating in markets for materials that otherwise would be destined for landfill. Obviously, one of the big things that we're very encouraged about is expansion of recycling infrastructure within the state of Tennessee, and that is collection and sortation. And fourthly, we also believe that there's a great opportunity for us to promote the use of recycled content that is generated domestically. And this came up earlier. In particular, while this is important for all of the different materials on plastics and in the PET side in particular, there's been a very significant increase in imported material that has come over the last few years since 2020. We see recycled rPET imports up 300%. And what this has done has undermined the domestic recycling system and the end markets for those materials. And we are seeing PET reclaimers going out of business in the US today. Now, we're on the front end of this in the US, and we've been watching this transpire for a while in Europe already, and you're seeing decimation of the recycling industry there. We're hopeful that we can start to try to create measures in the US to kind of pause that and ensure that we've got a good place for these materials to go domestically. And I think that's about it. I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you for that. And I think that import piece is very important, that some of us have learned lately just how much is being shipped into our country that somebody else's trash to fill the need for, at least some manufacturers desire to have a certain percentage recycled material. We have any questions for our guest? Mr. Hastings?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's known that polyesters and the form of polyesters in the textile business has a form of arsenic in it. What are you doing to mitigate the arsenic in the textile business? We as a company, we're working with the carpet industry on their fluff, which is a catalyst for petroleum products. It's great for that. But we wouldn't take it on because we kept getting hits of arsenic. So if it's going back into the food process and the medical process, we need to make sure that arsenic is mitigated.
Thank you. It's a fantastic question. It's a very important question with these technologies. One of the things that Eastman has done with this very intentionally throughout this process is we look at what we think any of the expected or known contaminants may be from different feedstocks coming into the system. Arsenic is one of those. Another one that we're looking at as well are the PFAS products that came up earlier as well. So we have very specific requirements with any of our feedstock sources on the carpet and the textiles. A little bit easier to control that right now because we're using pre-consumer materials that aren't just being collected necessarily broadly, through different use and different channels. What we do very intentionally, though, is we've developed a waste and an emissions study that we would be very happy to share with this task force if that would be helpful, to walk through where the different contaminants, if they are present, where they go and how we're handling them. What I can report, though, is the DMT and the ethylene glycol that we are producing on the back end will not carry any of those types of contaminants with them. And so the products that we are producing are going to be of virgin-like quality. And so Testing on the front end to prevent things from getting in that have contaminants that we do not want is our first step of measure. The second one is very clear understanding of where those contaminants may go within our process and putting in the appropriate remediation. So whether that's through wastewater treatment or through landfilling, or even in some cases hazardous incineration, if that's what we need to do with some of those streams. Thank you.
Excellent. Ms. Barrett?
Thank you, Holly. It's been a few years since we spoke on this issue. Just for clarification, on the mechanical aspect of it, that utilizes post-consumer products, but your molecular process is only pre-consumer products. So did I hear that
it's-
correctly?
No, what we're doing is we're focusing on the hard to recycle out of the post-consumer stream. So if you think about, if you would see the bales of material that we're processing, they're not going to be like a clear bottle bale. It's going to be thermoforms and colored and opaque bottles that are PET. Many, like we're getting those from Rumpke. Also, we're buying those from PET reclaimers, so kind of an outthrow for them. So we are getting a very significant portion of our packaging is going to be post-consumer. The textiles and the carpet are more pre-consumer, partly because the recycling systems and the infrastructure for those two types of materials are just so much more nascent, and just we don't have a lot of post-consumer material available for those yet.
And pre-consumer, you're going to have more of the waste, the cutoffs. Your volume's going to come more from those pre-consumer for those products.
Right now, our volumes are predominantly post-consumer. So we are getting almost all post-consumer based material, and then we're kind of supplementing that with the pre-consumer. Part of that is, very candidly, is that when we have customers downstream that are looking for ability to make claims on their products about use of recycled content, post-consumer material is really what they're most concerned about. When you look at the waste issues, you look at the contamination in the oceans and the pollution there, most of that is coming from post-consumer material rather than pre-consumer. So that's why we try to lean towards that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Hooper?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. And I apologize if you said this and if you're willing to share, where all do y'all get your material from?
It's a great question. We've actually tested about, I think, around 1,500 different samples of material from different places. So some of our key places that we're getting material, one is locally. So we are collecting material locally through collection bins on site, also through the Food City program. We're also working with Rumpke very specifically to get that targeted, hard to recycle PET packaging stream from them. In addition, though, we are also buying material from PET reclaimers who do a sort of their own product or their own material that they buy when it comes in, because when they buy bales, they will have thermoforms and colored and opaque bottles that come in as part of that. And then they separate that before they actually go through the recycling process with the clear bottles. So those are material that we're getting as well. There's less than 30 reclaimers in the US. So it's kind of a mix of those different places too. Obviously, textile industry, carpet industry are some other places that we're getting some pre-consumer material. So those are coming from various places in the region. But we're sourcing from a pretty wide area geographically.
Thank you.
Chairman Grills?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm sitting here thinking, we've got the clear plastic bottles and we've got the green bottles and the different color bottles. And everybody's putting an effort forward in their companies trying to recycle. But that seems to be an impediment to the process with those contaminants, if you will. I'm going to call them contaminants, the colored bottles. Why are we still doing that?
It's a great question. I think that what we're seeing in some cases, there might be reasons or rationale on those that are more marketing driven, but in some cases, there are really key requirements that produce a package that protects the product better on the inside. Not everyone knows that some of the green bottles that are used for some of the, let's say, carbonated water, that helps to prevent the carbonation from evaporate or from leaving. So it's a way to offer an oxygen barrier. Another place that you'll see this too, if you think about the Fairlife bottles, and I don't know if you guys have seen these, this is a really great example. So this is a product, it's a dairy product that has an exceptionally long shelf life. And that is due to the UV and the visible light blocking. So they use an opaque bottle that then also has a label that covers it from head to toe to help prevent additional light blocking. So Eastman is a part of several organizations that help to drive brands towards using the packaging formats that, one, offer them the best protection for their product, but also create the best compatibility for recycling at the end of life. In the end of it, these brands are hopefully the ones that we want to see buying these materials again, but they also will want to make sure that their products are recyclable at the same time.
Mr. Mallon?
Thank you for and especially for the chemistry lesson. That was helpful. When you talked about pre-screening and rejecting is the word in the scrap metal business. What you pre-screen and then reject or don't put through your process, does that go back to the supplier or do you have to live?
I think there might be varying agreements with some of our supply contracts. So I'm not sure exactly, but Eastman does operate a landfill. And in some cases that might be a place where it would go. But my guess is if we had an agreement with an organization and started getting things that we weren't expecting, it would probably be something that we would work on with that supplier.
Okay, and I presume this is proprietary, patented, the things that you're doing, or
Well, which parts of it?
Well, I don't want to
Parts of
ask
it.
you. I don't want to meddle too much, but I mean, is it intended to be proprietary to the extent it can be?
Yeah, I think in many cases, as a chemical company, we take a lot of pride in our intellectual property and in the innovations that we develop. However, we also recognize that there are a lot of questions around these technologies, and the more that we are able to open up and share information, like I mentioned, the waste and emissions study, trying to help understand if contaminations go in, where do they go, what happens. That's a level of transparency that I'm not sure that we have always really embraced, but we recognize that these technologies are transformative, but we need to take the time to share as much as we can with folks like you.
And then not a loaded question, I promise, but is it intended to be a profitable business unit or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Eastman is a publicly traded company. And so we actually did quite a bit of investigation on the front end to try to determine if there was appropriate value for these materials before making the investment. When we announced that we were going to build the methanolysis facility in Kingsport, we shared that it was going to be a $250 million investment. It was more than that. I don't know that we're sharing exactly what that number is, but it ended up being significantly more. And so these are areas that it's very important for us to make sure that for us as a company, for our employees, and then also for our shareholders, that we can do this in the right way and still be able to be a profitable organization.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Thomas, did you have something?
Well, I think he asked my question of her. But I would like to appreciate your presentation. And I think this is a good example of something that I haven't quite gelled. But one of the things that the environmental laws do is for recyclers, you're put on your heels because you're trying to get an exception from handling waste and what's supposed to happen to waste. Before you can get permission to do the recycling. And maybe we need to look at the regulation and laws, and for opportunities like this, look at this as a business, and that the feedstock for that business is not a waste. Obviously, you got to have safeguards to make sure that you don't generate more environmental problems with the material. But I think that some way to make it easier for innovative technologies to be what we're calling recycling now, not have to jump through the hoops of proving that you get exempted from the waste disposal regulations.
Thank you for that. And we really appreciate you being here, Ms. Alexander. And we had specifically asked for this type of an angle so that we could have this knowledge. So thank you for that, and appreciate you being available afterwards.
Thank you.
Next, we have Christy Newman with Arconic Tennessee Operations.
Hi, good
Welcome in.
afternoon. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Certainly.
We appreciate the chairs. Senator Reeves just walked out, but appreciate you asking us to be here today. As you mentioned, I'm Christy Newman with Arconic Tennessee Operations. I've been there 17 years. I work in community relations and communications with the company. I'm actually third generation after my grandfather and father, so it's definitely in the blood there at Tennessee. Arconic at a glance, you may know us as Alcoa, the aluminum company of America. In 2016, we split from Alcoa to become Arconic, but still doing a lot of the same things, especially here in Tennessee. Arconic as a business includes rolled products, building and construction, and extrusions. We are in the rolled products business at Tennessee. We employ 11,000 globally, 8,000 of those in the US, and 1,100 at Tennessee operations. Here's the primary markets, all of them aluminum-based, of course, aerospace, ground transportation, which we also call automotive, packaging, which we call can sheet, industrial solutions, and building and construction systems. Now, we are strictly at Tennessee operations in ground transportation, packaging, and industrial. And we'll spend the bulk of the time today talking a little bit more about can sheet or packaging. Tennessee operations is actually divided into two different campuses, the North Plant and the South Plant. I mentioned that we employ more than 1,100 in Blount County. We sit on 850 acres, so we're also a bit of a property management organization there as well. 85 of those acres are under roof. The South Plant is where we take in the bulk of our recyclable material, also known as UBCs or used beverage containers. That's a huge feedstock for us there. We take those cans, run them through a shredding process, a delacquering process, and then a melting process before they're recast into new aluminum ingots. Then those ingots are shipped over to that North Plant, and they go through a series of rolling mills, hot and cold mills, before they're packaged and then shipped to our end market customers in the form of a coil. A coil is really the only product we make out of Tennessee operations. We just make it for different customers. Here's a little bit of the history of Tennessee operations. We've been in business like Eastman for over 100 years there in Alcoa, Tennessee. We're proud that we've been able to continue to evolve and sort of morph into what the market has demanded of us. Significant milestones are noted here, but let me draw your attention to 2015 when we actually invested $300 million in automotive, and then shortly after invested $100 million in our industrial expansion. And we've continued to reinvest in the can sheet markets over that time. And being over 100 years old in our community, we recognize how important it is to give back to that community that's meant so much to us over the years. So in this year alone, Arconic Foundation has donated close to $600,000 in East Tennessee for local nonprofits and schools. And we're currently working with Keep Blount Beautiful, Blount County Schools, and Blount County government on a recycling program that will hopefully help increase awareness of recycling and what that means to Arconic there at Tennessee operations, and also helps us collect more aluminum cans, which is the end result. So packaging, I mentioned, is really our feedstock for that is what we would say are UBCs, used beverage containers, what a lot of folks might consider trash. We don't consider trash. Cans are not trash. So if I leave you with one thing today, it's like cans are not trash for us. And I want to emphasize that. Packaging or the can sheet market currently averages about 1/3 of our product mix, along with automotive and industrial products. We're a major supplier to a lot of the customers that are well known in the can industry. And we work with our tech center and those customers to meet the highest possible of recycled content in those cans. So recycling is important to us, as you can see, because we need a lot of those UBCs that we were talking about. And we rely on roughly 5 billion cans or 225 million pounds of UBCs per year. So I don't know how many that would take to fill up Neyland Stadium, but it's probably pretty close to that. As I mentioned, our customers demand high recycled content in their products. Currently, that recyclable content is about 71%. So it's not just a nice to do to use these used beverage containers in the process. Our customers demand that we do that. And we say too many cans are going into the waste stream. In 2023 alone, 61 billion cans were discarded, and that's more than $1 billion in lost material value to us. Another thing to consider as competitors come online, there's a couple of new plants that are coming online in the Southeast, or they're expanding in the Southeast. And they're not only going to compete for our end products, that can sheet that we make, but they're also going to be competing for those UBCs, which are already in short supply throughout the land. So the industry is concerned as a whole that there just may not be enough UBCs to meet the demand that we see going into the future. So we understand that this task force is working towards sustainable solid waste solutions, and hope you'll join Arconic in recognizing cans aren't trash. And we do and can support policies that have shown they're drivers of waste diversion, policies like deposit return systems, public education and awareness, and efficient industrial operations. That's really it. But in closing, let me say again how much I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to represent Arconic. Thank you all for your willingness to help minimize waste, support manufacturing in Tennessee, and grow our domestic supply chain. I'd also like to offer you a chance to come out to Arconic Tennessee operations, tour the process. Would love to take you behind the scenes, show you in real life how we take these cans and make them into new cans. As was mentioned before, aluminum is infinitely recyclable. A can can be a can all over again without any degradation. I'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you for that. One question I'll kick off with is related to, I guess, my perception of not too distant history. And that is for years, a long time, folks collected cans, take them to the scrapyard, get so much money for them. And it was, it was a reasonable thing for people to do, paid for their time, I guess. And I think that may have dropped off. I'm not really sure. And so I weigh that with hearing recently that many in this country are importing aluminum cans from Canada. So the shipping cost alone on that, it would be just baffles me that we could pay to ship from Canada. Are we not paying enough at the scrapyard to increase the recycling here, or is it not economical to do that? There's something with the math that I'm missing there, and I'd love to fill in those blanks.
Well, as was mentioned on one of the slides, we're only recycling about 40% of the cans that are consumed in the U.S. So we really, we, like some of the other folks you're talking about, are importing from Canada, Mexico, and across the United States in order to get enough, feeder stock for what we need. I don't know if it's an awareness. There's a myriad of problems, but some of these grassroots efforts that we're trying with the schools and Keep Blunt Beautiful nonprofit organizations, we hope to continue to reinforce that and grow the awareness that these, like I said again, and then I'll keep saying it again, cans aren't trash, and we need them to support those 1,100 jobs in East Tennessee.
But at one time, it was profitable for aluminum companies to pay for that trash, pay something. Now, I don't know what aluminum is bringing now at the scrapyard, but I'm assuming it's not very much if folks aren't willing to collect the cans and turn them in. Am I incorrect there?
I don't know the cost. I'll defer to Kurt. He might have a better idea of that, but I'm happy to check on that for you. But I do know we're paying a premium for those UBCs, not as much as we would pay to get prime aluminum, but we still pay a great deal for that scrap material.
Okay, just something I'm curious about when
Sure.
I see those two things and I can't make it add up. So thank you for that. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, you must have done an excellent job.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sure, thank you for being here. Next, I would like to hear from Kurt Wells, the Senior Director of Regulatory Affairs and Stewardship with the Aluminum Association.
Thank you, Representative Todd. Give me just a minute here
Sure.
to get things set up.
Our IT expert is still in the audience right behind you if you need
All
him.
right, I think I got it. All right. Yes, thank you for the invitation to be here today, Representative Todd and members of the Solid Waste Task Force. I really appreciate the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the Aluminum Association. My name is Kurt Wells, and I've been involved in the aluminum industry for over 30 years, both in private industries, in corporate and policy roles, and for the last 12 years with the Aluminum Association. I'm joining the task force today to speak to the potential of modern recycling refund programs for beverage containers to reduce landfilling and littering across the state, and to open up a conversation about how these programs can play a role in addressing the solid waste management challenges facing the state of Tennessee. I think one of the earlier commenters referenced sort of an all-of-the-above approach. You're kind of early in your work and the opportunity to kind of consider a variety of options as to how they could help with the solid waste management challenges. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you today. I'm going to briefly cover some of the interest of the association in these types of programs, kind of building on some of the things that Christy mentioned earlier about the importance of used beverage containers to Arconic specifically, but take a little bit broader perspective on the aluminum industry. Cover the programs, how they work, what some of the key principles are in terms of guiding these programs, and what such a program could mean for the state of Tennessee. And the last thing that I wanted to do was provide some perspective about these programs from stakeholders who have thoughtfully considered some of the challenges and their benefits of operating these types of programs. So with that, I'm gonna jump right in. Just a brief introduction to the Aluminum Association. We were founded in 1933 and represent the full value chain of the U.S. aluminum industry, including companies that mine, refine, smelt, fabricate, and of course, recycle aluminum. The association exists to promote aluminum as a sustainable material of choice across key end markets and industries, including transportation, packaging, defense, electrical, and consumer durable goods. We represent about 70% of North American aluminum production. Happy to have Arconic as one of our members as well. And notably for this conversation today, the association represents 100% of the U.S. suppliers of can sheet that are used to manufacture aluminum beverage cans. In the U.S. today, that can sheet is comprised of 71% recycled content. You heard that stat from Christy. And I'm also happy that the can-to-can closed loop circularity rate is 96%. But as impressive as those numbers are, there's one glaring challenge that the association is tackling head on. The U.S. national consumer aluminum recycling rate is 43%, meaning that on average, the can from that beverage that you consume today has a better chance of being landfilled or littered than it does of being recycled. Given the strong economic and environmental benefits of turning old cans into new cans, the association finds that unacceptable and is therefore pursuing a number of strategies across the policy and technology space to improve that situation. So for the purpose of the conversation today, please consider me a representative of the aluminum industry, yes, but also as a representative of the beverage container material industry more broadly, that would include glass and PET bottles, which also face similar recycling challenges and are also supportive of modern recycling refund programs. Holly mentioned earlier kind of the difference between mechanical recycling and molecular recycling. And when we think about PET from the perspective of recycling refunds and the beverage container industry, we're really focused on that material that we can get into the mechanical recycling system. It's the easier to recycle of the two, and the opportunity to pull more material in for that process is really important to that material industry. So what is a recycling refund program? You may know it by some of its other names, such as a deposit return system or DRS, or a bottle bill, but at its heart, the program operates by providing consumers an economic incentive to recycle their beverage containers through their ability to obtain a recycling refund of a deposit on the container paid at the time of purchase. Changing consumer behavior can be hard, we know that, and economic incentives have proven to be motivating in that regard. Just in the case of aluminum, the aggregate economic value of cans lost to landfill and littering annually is over $1 billion, as Christy noted. But for any individual can, the economic value at the end of its life is only about a penny or a little over a penny. So I know, Chairman Todd, that addresses one of your questions. So that's, I think if you're an individual and you have a can, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of difference throwing it into the trash or throwing it into the recycle bin. But in the aggregate in the US, we're talking about $1.2 billion that's lost to landfill and littering every year. So the opportunity with recycling refunds is to put more skin in the game, if you will, for consumers by providing them a higher economic incentive to recycle and thereby keep economically valuable materials out of the landfill. In the US, as one of the other presenters noted, 10 states have these programs in place today, and globally they are becoming ever more prevalent with an increasing recognition of the value that they bring. So, with some of these programs having been in place for over 40 and 50 years now in the US, a lot has been learned about what high-performing programs look like, and I want to give you a brief review of those learnings today. I think the most important key principle is that the program should be managed and operated by a nonprofit consortium led by the beverage container industry with governmental oversight but not governmental funding. In this model, program funding is provided by fees paid by the beverage container industry to run and improve the program, the value of the unredeemed deposits, and the economic value of the scrap metal that's reclaimed from consumers at the end of their use of the beverage containers. In this model, legislation is used to set aggressive redemption goals and provide the flexibility for the consortium to innovate in providing convenient redemption options and economic incentives for the consumers to meet that redemption. Experience has demonstrated that redemption rates of up to 90% can be reached within several years of program startup. And we think that's really exciting on two fronts, both the percentage in terms of what can be recovered and how quickly these programs can be ramped up, because we've learned so much about how good programs work over the last few years, given the 10 states that have these programs today. Also key to these programs are broad beverage container coverage, targeting all prepackaged beverages except dairy and generally meal replacement products as well. So we're talking about soft drinks, waters, alcoholic beverages, spirits, trying to have a broad coverage so that we can get that material back into the supply chain. One other thing that I wanted to highlight is that in the highest performing systems, unredeemed deposits stay in the system to help fund improvements in its operation in providing customer convenience and achieving redemption rate goals. One of the other speakers mentioned that in several, I guess multiple of the deposit states today, that the unredeemed deposits are swept back into the general fund. And we find that is a disincentive to improvements in the program because that is not then available for use in improving and operating the program itself. So as I noted, one of the key factors in achieving high redemption rates is consumer convenience. An important option that supports this for consumers is their ability to fill a labeled bag with containers and redeem them independently of human interaction through a bag drop program if they so choose. These bag drop programs have been increasingly prevalent worldwide, and they really offer a lot of efficiency and functionality, both for consumers and for the operators of the program to be able to process them efficiently. For the consumer, dropping the bag off takes less than 30 seconds, and credit to a consumer account for the empty containers is typically made within one day or potentially several days afterwards. If the consumers want their funds and their cash quicker, other options for redemption can include full service redemption centers where they can actually receive human interaction, and also reverse vending machines, again, if there's that immediate need for redemption cash or credit. So, having briefly explained how these programs work, I next wanted to discuss the status of the Tennessee recycling landscape and what opportunities there are for improvement. I had some good discussion with the TDEC folks before the meeting today, and we kind of talked about the ARP and some of the data that doesn't get reported. And this actually is a slide from 2023 when a consultant called Eunomia put together the 50 states of recycling report, and they assessed consumer recycling only. So this doesn't include the ICI components noted earlier. But from a consumer recycling perspective, you can see they addressed a number of materials. Most of concerning for this presentation are the ones in the top left-hand corner: glass bottles and jars, aluminum cans, and PET bottles. You can see the data quality here. I think everybody would agree what they had to work with is fair. You can see that on the left-hand side. But fundamentally, it shows that there's some real gaps and improvements that could be made in the amount of recyclables that could be collected and then pulled into reuse opportunities. So you can see those improvements there, and really the goal is then keeping that material out of the landfills of the state. So aluminum cans show 15%, 5% of glass containers, and 3% of PET bottles. So a lot of opportunities for improvement there. So what could this potentially mean in terms of Tennessee? If we scale the performance of the best performing U.S. recycling refund program to the state of Tennessee, adjust for population and what their refund redemption rate is, our analysis found that there was an estimated 3.9 billion beverage containers sold annually in the state of Tennessee. 3.54 billion of those could be redeemed through a high-performing system, essentially meeting that 90% redemption rate, resulting in 2.1 billion aluminum cans, 1.2 billion PET bottles, and 250 million glass bottles. This performance would yield significant benefits in terms of avoided landfilling of economically valuable and recyclable materials, the near complete elimination of beverage container litter, the opportunity for consumers to direct their refunds to charitable organizations of their choice, and importantly for the glass, PET, and aluminum industries, the ability to source higher quality and quantity material to make into new beverage containers with higher recycled content. So it should be obvious to you that I'm presenting to you today that the Aluminum Association is supportive of these types of programs, but I thought it would be helpful as I close out my presentation to give you the perspectives of some other organizations that have considered these programs for increased coverage in the U.S. over the last couple of years. The first one was the R Street Institute, a think tank whose work is grounded in liberty and freedom, who assessed recycling refunds in a policy assessment several years ago and noted that, quote, for beverage containers, there is strong evidence to support that recycling refund policies are more effective at inducing consumer recycling behavior than curbside programs, affirming economic theory that financial incentives are a better motivator for recycling behavior than governmental mandates, unquote. The National Taxpayers Union, who bills himself as the voice of America's taxpayers on behalf of tax relief and tax reform, also did a 2023 policy assessment, and they stated that, quote, market-based pro-taxpayer alternatives are needed now more than ever, and if well-designed, recycling refund programs can fit that bill, unquote. I also wanted to note that several years ago, the polling firm Lincoln Park Strategies conducted extensive national polling that reflected strong public support for these programs across demographic, political party, and the urban-rural divide, with results showing that upwards of 80% of consumers nationally supported such a program. And even more notably, and probably more important, 90% of consumers in existing recycling refund states were supportive of their state's program and their participation in it. And one final note, in 2025, the consultant Reloop released its updated Littered with Evidence report that obviously is focused on litter issues. And they concluded that, quote, bottom line, the evidence is clear. Globally, recycling refund systems lead to swift, visible drops in beverage container litter. This is just a slide that articulates the association's position more succinctly, and it recognizes the ability of these programs to incentivize consumer behavior, increase recycling rates, avoid landfilling of valuable raw materials, and help provide a stable domestic supply of those valuable raw materials for manufacturing into new products. So at the start of my presentation, my objective, as I stated, was to start a conversation about how recycling refunds can be helpful to Tennessee and helping to address its landfilling challenges. By framing up that opportunity and providing some information about how such a program could be implemented, I hope that I've met that goal, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I'll also note that more information about these programs can be found at the website recyclingrefundswork.org. Thanks again for the opportunity to testify and for your attention on this topic.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. If you could go back a few slides,
sure.
if that's pretty easy, where you were given the numbers of the volume in Tennessee, that one, I
Yep.
guess that's it. So when you add all of those up, what volume like in cubic yards, would that be out of the landfill? Do you have that
Yeah,
by
I
chance?
should have probably done that. I had just have these in terms of containers
Okay.
themselves. I don't have the actual volume or tonnage that would equate to, but I can certainly make that calculation.
It'd be
as a-
interesting.
Yep.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions for our guest? Mr. Duckett?
I don't have a question as much as a comment. As I've said today and listened to a number of the presentations, and I do appreciate Mr. Wells' presentation as well as the others. But one of the things that I was going to say I'm grappling with, but it's not a matter of grappling with, but I think that we as a task force will ultimately have to factor into the process of where do we go from here. And I think for me, at least two components begin to stand out. One is education. We're going to have to educate the public around the importance of recycling. And then the other, you did in fact touch on, Mr. Wells, in your presentation, and that is the concept of instituting some type of deposits to help motivate individuals to participate. I'm quite sure a number of us in this room can remember the old days of when you purchased soda pop, you had to pay a deposit and it became a basis to incentivize you to return that bottle afterwards. But I have gleaned that through the presentations today, and those are at least two concepts that I would like for us to at least keep in the back of our mind as we continue to move forward, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? I will mention the water bottles that I buy, that 10-cent deposit will double the cost of my water bottles at the store. Now, granted, if I turn them back in, I get that money back, but at the store, it's going to literally double what I pay for those water bottles. Just a side note. Ms. Kern?
Working for a retailer that sells a lot of these products, I think it will also add, to labor costs of retailers that have to sort these products. Not everyone will have a kiosk or a bag program.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. We thought a lot about what makes sense for grocers and retailers in terms of, the potential for them to have to take these materials back. I think the goal with the modern programs that we're thinking about today is we want to provide incentives for the grocers and the retailers to take that material back, but not make it mandatory. The consortium has opportunities to innovate. You mentioned already, for example, that each county has some sort of a convenience center that could possibly use. But we think about, if we wanted to site a bag drop at a grocer, for example, the opportunity to put it in the parking lot, pay rent on that, potentially use it as a competitive advantage to attract customers to the store because they would have the opportunity to kind of kill two birds with one stone, drop their containers off, and then go on into the grocery store. Potentially, I know some of these programs in other states, actually there's a partnership with the grocers where they will actually offer some additional in-store credit over and above the value of the deposit to try to pull the consumers back into the store. So the goal is really to give the managing consortium the flexibility to innovate in terms of how the material is brought back, because really you're not going to get high redemption rates unless you have convenience for the consumer to bring those materials back.
Representative Grills?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just run this through me just real quick. We enact this. How's it going to work right off the bat? Who's going to manage the dollars? What are those dollars? Who's going to be on those boards? How's those dollars going to be managed?
Yep. No, that's all great questions in terms of the in terms of the implementation for the programs. What we've seen is they can be stood up fairly quickly because we've got the experience not only in other states but also around the world. There is some time. You've got to decide at what point you're going to start charging the deposit, for example, when the implementation occurs, what the consortium has to do in terms of ensuring convenience. So typically the way it works is you've got a ramp up time where you might say, after 2 years, your legislative target is to get 65% redemption, which should not be challenging. But then maybe after 5 years, you get to 90%, for example. So it's expected that, consumer education, actually implementing the deposit, getting the convenient bag drop collection, full service redemption centers set up is going to take some time. And you're not going to get the high recycling rates right off the bat because they have to have the collection infrastructure to be able to be convenient for the consumer to take that material back. So yes, there is an aspect of implementation that has to be worked through.
And those dollars that are taken, put into an account, who manages those dollars?
So typically, the way that most of the programs that we are advocating for work is the industry-led consortium manages those.
And who's responsible for the overseer of that?
So there is governmental oversight in terms of audit capability, enforcement, that sort of thing, and then reporting out of what the dollars were used for in terms of expanding convenience, logistics. This is basically just one big reverse logistics project, right? In terms of bringing this material back in.
So you said have a government oversight, but that committee or that
consortium,
however you say that word.
Sorry.
Who's responsible? Those will be appointed by whom?
Yeah, so typically it's either the beverage brands themselves or the distributors who are essentially the board of directors for the nonprofit
and those
organization.
Those dollars will only be used to
maintain in the system.
For reimbursement?
Right. For operate the system and then reimburse the 10 cents, right? Because if a consumer pays 10 cents, they get the 10 cents back when they refund the bottle.
So it's not like not a way to help build infrastructure for other recycling needs or other environmental needs or other.
Depending on how the legislation structures it, our recommendation is that money that's inside the system should stay inside the system to improve the operation of the system.
Okay, I'm just trying to get my head around it.
No, it's great questions. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Mr. Wallen?
So thank you for the presentation. In the scrap industry, when eddy current technology showed up, let's just say in the 1990s, there were one of the sort of disruptions of that I witnessed for a couple of decades was the reopening of landfills, because suddenly there was this pent-up value of metallics that couldn't be recovered, and now with technology they could. This beverage assessment that adds more value to what's in a landfill. Have you seen any situations in the other 10 states where there's been any disruption to existing or historical landfills?
Short answer is no. That's sort of a vision that we have potentially in the future because there's so much buried metallics that have so much value in these landfills over the last few decades. Obviously, particularly in the 40 states that don't have that material. And we've been involved in some sort of pilot type programs to look at really basically to try to better define the economics of being able to pull the aluminum back out. But there's nothing beyond pilot scale that I'm aware of.
Mr. Hastings?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question you asked a minute ago, I think it's going to be between 16,000 and 16,500 cans per cubic yard based on a 2,000 pound yard of cans. And I'm thinking on this would be set up the way with this charitable organization to be able to give the money back. I think it needs to be a independent firm that represents the government that the money should flow through if you're going to do something like that. I don't want to put it back on the bottling company or whoever it might be to handle that money as if it would possibly be handled that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're open to opportunities. We've just kind of looked to see how some of these other programs have operated in terms of essentially, I call it a consortium. Maybe a cooperative is a better way to phrase it. But there's certainly transparency around how the amount of unredeemed deposits, what the funding goes toward, that sort of thing, to be able to keep transparency in the system. So appreciate that comment.
Seeing no others, I really appreciate you being here and sharing this information with us today.
Sure, happy to.
At this time, we will move into our public comment period. If we have any folks from the public that, oh, well, on the agenda, we're supposed to do afternoon discussion first. So let's do that since that's on the agenda. Any discussion amongst ourselves, which can be done after the public comments too, I guess, but anyone have anything that they want to just discuss with what we've seen and heard today? Okay, now we'll move into public comments. Anyone is welcome to approach and let us know what's on your mind. You'll have 5 minutes to address the task force, and then we'll be glad to open up if there are any questions related to those comments. Just state your name, who you're with, unless you just represent yourself, and feel free to speak.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. I am encouraged by your willingness and your work, considering all of these different recycling alternatives to landfills. This is very encouraging. My name is Ralph Trieschman, and I live in Oneida, Tennessee, and I'm from Scott County. My wife, Michelle, and I operate a burgeoning resort hotel and spa on 60 acres, serving thousands of out-of-town guests for overnight stays, weddings, reunions, etc. We sit minutes from the Big South Fork National Park, which brings in over 750,000 annual visitors to the region, and whose river, known as the Big South Fork of the Cumberland River, ends up right here in Nashville. We are a tourism destination, an economic engine, and a community gathering place. So we are here to defend our personal home and our business that we've invested millions of dollars in. Furthermore, I serve as a director of the Scott County Chamber of Commerce and chairman of the Oneida Industrial Development Board. So I am also here representing the economic viability of our whole region. Our community is under attack, again, by speculators who think that rural Tennessee is an easy target. With timber and coal long gone, the new extraction industry seems to be in just landfills proposed by out-of-state real estate speculators. This past April, we learned that one such developer is trying to revive a 15-year-old permit with intent to flip the site for quick profit. This new landfill site sits directly beside our existing landfill that you've seen in Mr. Hopper's presentation as a green triangle. Sorry, Mr. Hooper, not Hopper. Recall that a green symbol is a landfill with more than 10 years of life left. In fact, our current landfill will last through 2048, according to TDEC reports. In fact, the landfill's engineer communicated less than a month ago that they have not included the additional 550 acres of the 800-acre property that they already own. So clearly, we have generational capacity handled for our region. Yet, the speculative landfill investor is claiming that they are filling a need as a justification for proposing 700 more acres of waste on top of springs that feed into the Big South Fork and your Cumberland River. Collectively, these two independent for-profit landfill projects would occupy 1,500 acres, making it the second largest landfill in the country. Public records have shown that in 2010, TDEC approved the permit these speculators discovered, even though our regional solid waste board never approved it. A mandatory prerequisite that Mr. Hooper noted as Part 8 of the statutes. TDEC also issued it with no Jackson Law approval, another mandatory requirement. These are not minor technicalities. These are the laws defining TDEC's authority, and the land has since gone through foreclosure, changes in ownership, and legal entanglements. TDEC, however, seems to be moving this project along, turning their oversight into our crisis. That benefits the investors, but it does not protect taxpayers. So let me quickly turn to the two messages I wish you to take away from my conversation today. Number one, the term NIMBY, we find, is an insulting and a misunderstanding of the impact of landfills. There is no backyard. The impact is across the entire community, causing economic and environmental degradation to our investments and our basic needs like drinking water. Speaking of water, while I do not believe the fake news of landfill crisis, the leachate crisis is real. Landfills produce millions of gallons of toxic leachate every month, filled with PFAS and other chemicals. The Oneida Water Department this year had to stop accepting leachate from our existing landfill because they reached the limits of their capacity of what they could handle. So where would the leachate from a larger landfill go when ours looks to expand, as it will? And where would leachate from a second 700-acre landfill go? Boiling it and putting the same pollutants into our air is not a scalable solution. So what are small towns to do with all this polluted water? Pour it into the Cumberland? You cannot add landfills without answering this question. Other countries have figured this out decades ago. Germany, others send single-digit percentages of waste to landfills. Tennessee can be just as smart. We stop propping up outdated systems. And suggesting that the Jackson Law somehow is a hindrance to solving this waste management problem or a hindrance to recycling is kind of laughable, which brings me to my final point, that rural communities need local control. Without local authority over landfill siting, we return to exactly the situation that the Jackson Law was designed to prevent, i.e. community destruction without representation, which is simply as un-American as you can get. It is not just inconvenient red tape, it is our right to be heard. As an example, our Chamber of Commerce has formally resolved to oppose a second landfill in favor of recycling. Our Industrial Board unanimously opposes it. Our city and county governments have unified in opposition. Our Senator Ken Yeager has stated he is opposed to the new landfill. The National Park Service, federal entity, has written to TDEC demanding answers about apparent risks to the park and the endangered species therein. Our Solid Waste Board wrote to TDEC saying we do not have a need for a second landfill. This is not the hysteria of so-called ignorant citizen groups crying NIMBY. These are informed voters, elected leaders, scientists, and business owners who understand the consequences of burying millions of tons of waste on this proposed site. But we are being ignored. Why?
Thank you for your comments. That's a little exceeded our 5 minutes, but certainly wanted you to at least to finish. I understand. And stick around. There may be some questions. We'll get everybody in if we can for comments. So the next.
Afternoon. My name is Jennifer Shockley, and I am a native of Scott County, and I'm the president of a community organization named Cumberland Clear. I'm here to you today because, as Ralph has mentioned, we are fighting a landfill battle in our community. Bear with me just a second, sorry. As Cumberland Clear, our mission is simple. We want to protect our people from increasing industrial impacts and protect our rural land and local businesses for future economic development. What we keep seeing across Tennessee is that extractive industries and dumping operations show up from out of state with a polished pitch, but the reality is always the same. They make a great deal of money, and then they leave and take that money with them. It does not stick around into our state. And instead, they leave behind the damage that the Tennessee taxpayers must deal with for decades. It's happening again in our community. A trash by rail project is proposed across the school or the road from my children's elementary school. They want to bring in trash from across the country, not Tennessee, not our region, from across the country. If we have a landfill crisis, why are we continuing to allow solid waste industries to bring trash into our state? If our landfills are failing, we should stop that first to protect the utilities that our counties need. We have to protect our natural resources. I don't think if we have a landfill crisis, whose crisis is it? It's not the solid waste industry. They're making billions of dollars in our state. It's not East Tennessee. We have, if anything, we have too many landfills, as our county is about to have if that proposed project goes through. So we ask that you guys look into these initiatives for recycling. And earlier, I'm sorry, I can't read your name, but you mentioned education for recycling. That's really important. But when I was in school, they come in and they educated us to recycle, but we had no way to recycle. We had no recycling bins. Right now, there are people in my community to recycle. They have to travel 45 minutes on back roads to get to one location that accepts some recyclables. It's very frustrating, and rural communities are 33% of the state. So that's a large portion of the problem that we're going to have to figure out. We just ask you that you please continue to support Jackson's Law. This is, Doug Jackson enacted that law. He spearheaded it because he understood that rural communities did not have zoning regulations like urban communities do. So if a landfill wants to be opened and developed in our community, we had no way to stop it, because agricultural communities don't want someone to tell them when and if they can build a barn, what they can do with their land. So it's important that those agriculture communities and rural communities can still have that same way of life, but still have some protection. And Jackson Law does that. It protects our communities. So I thank you guys for doing this. I thank you guys for being here and discussing all these different solutions. But we just want to remind you that landfilling is a dead end. Everything that goes into a landfill is dead. Even the rainwater that goes through a landfill is toxic. And you clean it up if you can afford to pay it. So I thank you guys for your time, and just please don't push more landfills on us.
Thank you for that. Thank you for traveling here to testify. You're
Hi,
recognized.
Thank you for having me. My name is Darlene Price. I'm with a show called Truth or Politics. We're on the internet, but also we have a local cable TV access. But mostly I'm here because I'm from McCreary County, Kentucky, that borders where this landfill she's just talking about is going to go. And I attended a meeting, a TDEC meeting in Scott County, Tennessee a few weeks ago that caused me great concern because of the answers that were given. And I fear that Tennessee is going down the same very dangerous road that the state of Kentucky has already gone down. As we sit here today, the state of Kentucky has the highest cancer rate in the nation. In particular, those cancers has the highest cancer rate with types of cancers caused by PFAS and asbestos, which of course these landfills are notorious to have, and it results in their leachate. In this meeting that I went to, the TDEC meeting, one of the answers to the questions was that TDEC is not testing, period, for PFAS anywhere. Not in landfills effluent, not in before it goes through wastewater treatment plants. And what happened in Kentucky is they were allowing, and they are allowing, wastewater treatment plants to accept leachate, not testing for PFAS, still not testing for PFAS, and you can't find what you don't test for. And guess what? I think that that's not a coincidence that our cancer rate is the highest rate in the nation for cancers related to this. And you guys are going down the same road. Then a question was asked, well, can the air, the emissions of these dumps be tested for PFAS? And the answer was no, there's no way to test for PFAS in the emissions. That is patently incorrect. It's another thing that concerned me. And then the rationale that was given by persons from TDEC was, well, we have no Tennessee statute telling us to test for PFAS. Well, I'm asking you here today, where's the statute, the Tennessee statute that says that you are forbidden to test for PFAS? Because I'm here to tell you it does not exist. So that is a choice that TDEC is making to refuse to test for PFAS, which is a very dangerous choice, that you're not testing either the emissions from the landfill leachate for PFAS when it leaves, or when it goes through these wastewater treatment plants before it enters them. And by the way, and I've checked this out, I've done my homework, no wastewater treatment plant is designed to clean or purify PFAS or asbestos, which is notorious in these landfills, especially landfills who accept demolition waste. That is a dangerous, dangerous road to be headed down. And I implore you to look into this and put a stop to this before you end up, we like the UK Wildcats like competing against the T-Vols. What you don't want to do is be competing for us to be the highest cancer rate in the nation in reference to cancers associated with PFAS. That's a very dangerous thing to do. And I'm very concerned about this landfill going in on the border where I live, because what happens in Bear Creek, this ginormous landfill is going to be going in. My drinking water is downstream. Yes, some streams flow north. And my drinking water and the drinking water in McCreary County is downstream from this. So it's going to affect the drinking water where we're at. And right now, as we sit here today, the current landfill already has violations. And oh, by the way, most landfills in Kentucky have violations, and most wastewater treatment plants have violations. Well, if your wastewater treatment plants aren't doing the job, and they're just simply not, then what's next? I think the burden of this needs to be placed on the landfill industry. They've known about this for decades. They could have solved this. They're making billions of dollars and putting the burden on municipalities to, let's cram this landfill down that local municipality's throat. That's unacceptable. So I implore you, please don't let them put this ginormous landfill right next to a national park. That's crazy. That's like going and putting a huge landfill in Yellowstone Park. Why would you do something like that? That just makes no sense. And also, please start having TDEC check for PFAS and these effluents, because your TDEC representative said, no, they are not testing at all. And I'm telling you, you're heading down a dangerous road. So I implore you to please stop that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Price.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Melissa Farley. I represent Rutherford Forward, and I appreciate the opportunity to share my opinions with the members of the task force today. Our request is that since this task force is funded and making recommendations, that all members of the task force could be provided a state email address so that we could, contact with information that we have or questions. And also perhaps that there would be a call-in for comments, since this is a statewide task force and people in East or West Tennessee may also want to make comments, but can't be here today. Our experiences in Murfreesboro are a case study of why people have the NIMBY attitude, as referenced in the last task force meeting. Rutherford County originally contracted a private company to address issues running a smaller landfill for county garbage. This landfill has mushroomed into the regional solution for a large part of Tennessee. The decision was made to accept huge quantities of aluminum dross as well as radioactive materials at Middle Point. Aluminum dross chemical reactions have resulted in elevated temperatures as well as increased hydrogen sulfide. Higher temperatures shorten the lifespan of the liner at Middle Point. Based on the Geotechnical Frontiers 2017 scientific paper regarding elevated temperatures, that lifespan may already be over. Residents in a large radius have been subjected to emissions from the landfill that resulted in burning of the nose and eyes. This has occurred indoors in healthcare facilities, schools, sports fields, and in retail and homes. Our concern go beyond odors, focus on volatile organic compounds such as hexane, benzene, toluene, and xylene. The city of Murfreesboro sampling data from 9/15/25 just recently has recorded overpressurization at over 100 wells in each of the recent 6-month periods, stating these wells, quote, "were not collecting landfill gas as required," end quote. We appreciate the work of TDEC staff to cite Middle Point with 6 minor violations and 1 major violation this year. However, enforcement seems to be weak when the operator has not been fined. How much, if any, water sampling has TDEC completed in runoff sites near Stones River this year? And why is the city having to spend taxpayer money to do this testing of the air and water when TDEC is supposed to be protecting us? Recently, BFI filed a permit modification application to open the previously capped aluminum dross cells and put garbage directly over it. Decomposing garbage makes leachate, a liquid which causes a chemical reaction when it comes into contact with aluminum dross. Middle Point's history just this year with so many citations related to leachate and the updated city data that tells of leachate discharge into the Stones River are quite alarming. We urge TDEC to not approve This permit modification, as our Representative Brian Terry said, any proposal adding capacity beyond what a current permit allows is an expansion. The question is not only about landfill capacity, but should a county be subjected to these conditions for another 20 years when county, city officials, and the regional board and the public have made it plainly clear that they want the pollution to end? Related to the topic today, manufacturing and the need for recycled materials, and as Eastman and Arconic have discussed, the need for the recycled materials, I just wanted to mention that I support the Tennessee Waste to Jobs bill. Tennessee already has the highest tipping fee in the Southeast. So, we'd like to see the businesses who create the packaging and who want to buy our glass, plastic, and aluminum fund this effort. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anyone on the task force have questions for our guests? Okay, seeing none, we'll open it back up for discussion. Mr. Hastings?
I understand. Some 25 years ago, I was involved in a process of acquiring land and dealing with the Jackson Law whenever it first came about. So in full disclosure, haven't been having anything to do with landfills in the last 20 years. But I'm a supporter of the Jackson Law. People should be able to say whether they want it in my backyard or not. There's two things that people don't want: landfills and rock quarries. I've been in the construction business for a long time also. I think there's a way around this, and I have a proposal for this board that I've worked on over a long period of time. But I think the people, and I appreciate your presentation today, should have the right. The problem that we've got is that the local governments do not have any authority over these landfills. We need to set up a program, and I have that in my proposal, where local governments will have some say-so in how these landfills are run. And believe me, there's more money in landfills than there is in 10 gold mines, and I'm in that business also. So there's tremendous amount of money involved in it. There's enough money to go around for everyone, and the people that accept these landfills should be incentivized financially for taking these landfills, and it needs to be in an area where they want them and they can be accessed, and where they can be accessed by rail as well. I'm completely against bringing outside waste into the state of Tennessee. And the reference you're referring to in Middle Point landfill, that was salt cake that caused that problem. There is a salt cake landfill in upper West Tennessee. That's where the salt cake should have gone. If you mix salt cake with general garbage and it rains on it, it turns completely hot red, and it'll set a landfill on fire. And that's where the problem has come in there. I know, because I know the operators. So I'm against repealing the Jackson Law. People should have a say-so in what happens in their backyard.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Well, I've heard several comments today from task force members of how productive this has been, and really appreciate all of our guests that have come today to share with us, share their knowledge into this industry, if you want to call it that, this certain issue that we have. And appreciate the time in preparing the presentations and just being here. And appreciate the task force coming out to join us for this particular meeting. We have a tentative date of January 22nd, 2026 for our next task force meeting. We will ascertain the time of day. We will be in session then. So we've got a few hurdles to clear there, but I would anticipate it would be sometime that morning. It won't be very early, but because of our normal session that day, but we'll get it as soon as we can and get that out to the task force members and to the public. So if no one else has anything else to add, Ms. Cothran. Sure.
Is the date the 22nd or the 26th?
22nd is the Thursday And
okay.
that's, we were shooting for a Thursday,
Okay.
so.
I had the 26th on my calendar.
I
Sorry.
think I had 26 in my head for some reason as well and got to looking at it. So, yeah. But knowing what the way the session runs, it would be difficult to do that on that day.
Thank you for clarifying.
Sure,
I'll change my calendar.
Try to give as much warning as we can, that everybody can kind of plan for that. So, Mr. Hooper?
Yeah, just wanted to make you aware that at our last meeting, there were questions that I didn't have the answers to. So you should have gotten a copy. We worked with our solid waste team to put answers for those together. And if you have follow-ups, happy to help work through those. Thanks.
Appreciate you doing that. Seeing no other business before the task force, we will stand adjourned.